Hey everyone, welcome to the Guiding You Forward podcast, where we talk about all things financial related. And today we're talking about managing money in uncertain times, which we have pretty uncertain times right now. So we're excited to talk with Chad Waddoups. Hi, Chad.
Hello.
Just recently, I was having a conversation with a friend, and she said, you know, Kristalina, my father just lost 80% of his wealth in the stock market because he didn't take it out. And she was saying how her husband had taken out what they had invested. And this was months ago, right? When COVID was first happening and we saw those crazy drops in the stock market. You know, she was just saying, I'm so glad we took that money out. Had we not, we would have lost it all. What are your thoughts on that? Is that really what we should be doing, shouldn't be doing? I mean, obviously my friend's father is way closer to retirement than we are. But what are your thoughts? What do we do in times like this?
Yeah, that's a common question, and the scenario that you presented there is fairly common as well. If you think about when the market drops, the temptation is to sell because I've got to save what I have. I don't want to lose everything, right?
Yeah.
But what we try to do through this idea of emotional investing and behavioral investing is we think, okay, the market's dropped. It didn't drop 80%, but your friend lost 80%, they said. From this point forward, is it more likely to go down more or go up? I think if you're rational about it, you think it's probably more likely to go up at this point. And if you sell it, you've lost it. If you sell it, you're out, right, with an investment. And so to give it the time, especially if you have time on your side. Now, if you need that money tomorrow, that may be the best rational decision to get that money back right now. But if it's not for years out, which for most of us it would be with their retirement savings, letting it ride, letting it have the opportunity to come back, which the market has proven to do time and time again, if we have time on our side, is quite often the most rational choice, just to wait.
Okay, so keeping that perspective though, right?
Right.
Let's say I've had a pay cut, I've been furloughed, whatever that looks like. I need some money now. What do we do?
You need some money now, but you also need the growth that it can bring for the future. Now, if you're laid off or furloughed, that may be completely different because you have to cover your monthly expenses.
Yeah.
Right? That's job one. You have to get those done. But beyond that, we need to take the emotion out of it just a little bit and realize that we need that money to continue to grow for us. And over the long term, the market's done that.
Okay. And so earlier you mentioned the importance of having, you know, those priorities with our financial goals and having that emergency fund. Now, I've heard, hey, you got to have 3 months saved, 6 months saved, a year saved. What really is realistic for people when it comes to that emergency fund that we can pull from, essentially, you know, if we were furloughed or had a pay cut?
Yeah, great question. So there's not a gold standard that you have to have exactly this much.
Yeah.
The idea is to have as much as you possibly can, but you don't want to have too much either, because emergency funds are saved in a very safe investment vehicle. They're not necessarily growing for the future. But to have 3 to 6 months is typically the sweet spot for most people. And you don't have to have it tomorrow. You don't have to have it in a month. If you can set aside $20, $30, $10 a month and build towards that savings, that's a great plan to be on. Most Americans, numbers show us, don't have emergency funds.
At all.
At all. They have zero emergency funds. And so even if you can build up to a week during the first year that you're saving, and then build up to 2 weeks in the second year, and eventually you'll get to that 3 to 6 months, and it'll give you a peace of mind and certainly financial security if something were to happen.
Yeah. So then I could essentially pull from that more liquid, I would assume, account where that money would be.
Right. And you want that saved in something safe, like you were describing, because if you have to sell investments when you have an emergency, you may not be able to sell them at the time that's most advantageous to you. You may have to sell them when they're low, which is not a good scenario.
Right. Okay, so let's say, going back to the story about my friend whose, you know, father lost 80% of his income when, you know, our stock market fell recently. He didn't pull anything out. He's in it for the long haul. That's really where we all need to be, right? Regardless of what's going on in the world, if we have time on our side, leave it there.
That's typically the right answer, yes. And everybody's situation is a little bit different.
Fair enough.
Generally speaking, that's the right approach because, you know, over the last 100 years, the market has returned on average about 10% a year. Now we've had down years of 20 or 30%, up years of 20 or 30%.
Sure.
So if you have time on your side, though, that 10% comes into play roughly, that you'll be able to return that. If you need the money, like I said, if you need it tomorrow, next week, next year, that story changes a little bit.